Hello everyone and welcome to Hand Quilted by Carol Ann. I wanted to start a series on how to do a whole cloth quilt, hand quilting. You could use a lot of these same methods and then machine quilt the top or the quilt as you put it together. That would be just fine. But I noticed that there's a lot of people out there doing like machine quilting pantographs and a lot of the other stuff, but there's also a lot more people becoming interested in going back to the hand portion, the handwork of quilting and crafting. This is something I have been doing since I was 7 years old. So for 38 years, I have been quilting. My grandma started me out quilting when she babysat me after school, and I was an annoying little 7 and 8 year old, and she'd hand me a pile of scraps and put me on the floor underneath her big old floor frame that had a quilt spread out on it and keep me busy that way. And it wasn't very long before I was up on top of the quilt helping her out. I do things a little bit different than her, but I have a lot of the same methods that my grandma used, from the 1930s all the way up to 1990s, as long as she was quilting. Anyway, so I want to show you what I've started working on. I am making this quilt for my daughter for her birthday. She will be 26. And one of her favorite quilts that she would use when we would go visit my mom, so when we'd go to Grandma Rosie's house, was a tricot quilt. So now nylon tricot, I'm gonna turn my camera around. Hopefully this will work. I'm gonna have to. So this is what I have started marking. This is, we call it tricot, it's nylon tricot. It's very soft and silky and stretchy. So there's some techniques to working with this that I want to teach you. This part of the quilt where the green lines are, I have already marked. This is a pattern that I found in my grandma's supplies after she passed away. She had this pattern traced out on newspaper print that she got from my grandfather when he worked, before he retired from a newspaper factory. Anyway, so that part in the green was what I've already traced. I used Crayola washable markers. Do not use red, orange, or brown. They stain. The greens, blues, yellows actually do quite well. Here, where you see the dark lines and the pins in the fabric, this is where I'm getting ready to mark. I'm gonna flip back this corner, show you. My pattern is on Sharpie, on a sheet of plastic with Sharpie. And I copied that from the old newspaper print that my grandmother had because, well, that paper was falling apart. It had been used so many times and it was quite amazing. So as you can tell, I'm in a classroom. I'm a teacher, and when I'm marking a big quilt like this, I've done it on my kitchen table. I've done it on my living room floor. I have access to my classroom outside of contract hours. I find it much easier to come and use my big tables in my classroom to mark the quilt. So somebody might be saying, hey, wait a minute, there's only a quarter of the quilt, and that's true. The pattern, the reason I put it on plastic is because then it's reversible. I can easily mark that quarter of the quilt, and then I flip the pattern, matching up the edges and matching up the center, and then I mark the next one. And when that one's done, I will flip it to come back to this side, and then I will mark the final quarter of the quilt. I've already got 2 quarters marked, 2 quarters left to go. So I thought I would take time and show you how I mark my quilts. Okay, when I mark a quilt, I have my pattern that I've got on plastic underneath the fabric. It's on a light colored table so that it shines through and is easy to see. I have my fabric right side up, pinned on top of the pattern. I have my 4-foot stick, I call it, and another ruler, and my Crayola markable or washable marker. And basically I do all of my shapes first. And yes, sometimes you have to fix when you're, in between tables and have little bumps, not a big deal. I love to use tricot for these types of patterns, but you can use whole cloth as well. They do work best on solid fabrics. You can see the quilting better, the whole pattern stands out, and it's just a piece of art. If you do it on a print, that's okay, but just know that you won't get the full effect of the pattern. A lot of it will be lost in the print, but that's okay, you do you. One thing here, even though I do a little bit more traditional quilting than some people, is my philosophy is learn the rules so that you know how to break them. How and when. Do it with a purpose and intent, or if it's an accident, call it a happy accident and celebrate that you did something new. Okay, so I now traced out that rose right there. I'm gonna finish the rest of the frame around the center medallion right here. Okay, now I'm gonna finish out with this grid line that fills in the center. And I work off of the pieces I already have marked, even if it means they're not exactly marked up with what's on the pattern, simply because they're gonna be what's showing forever. The pattern will be removed. So I extend those lines. If I need to adjust anything, I always make sure that I slide the fabric and the plastic together, not just the fabric, because it'll end up with bubbles and it's just really super annoying. So I always move the fabric and the plastic together, usually by scooting from a section where there's a pin holding it in. I like to do all the lines in one direction first, and then go back and do the other direction when I have a crosshatch like this. Other common patterns that I have are sunbursts or just diagonals. I'm going to, one of my next projects is I want to design one that is more of a Celtic knot filler pattern. So that'll be coming up in the future. Okay, one like this line right here where I had a line but it didn't go all the way. I just have to scoot my ruler up, make sure I'm doing my best to keep my line straight. One thing about doing a pattern on this large of a scale is you can make little adjustments as you need, and it's very, very forgiving. Especially as buttery soft as tricot is, and the way it drapes, it's just pleasant. Anyway, so there I have finished tracing out my center medallion. I'm going to continue this same process as I go throughout the quilt. I have some radiating lines coming out from the center medallion that I'll finish up, but first I will do my outside edge, which is more roses and a scallop. That is the first step in my process of marking my quilt. When I have this quarter done, I will rotate my plastic pattern, scoot the fabric over, repin it, matching up all the sides, and continue to mark. Just wanted to show you one thing I do, and I use a different color. It's probably not very easy to see, but I have this yellow here, and I have used this yellow to mark my center lines. So I have a center grid, up at top and bottom and side to side, that I use to kind of center my pattern and just help me keep things aligned so that it all matches up. Okay, I have finished marking out this third quarter of the top. Got the border marked out. I used my my meter stick to get those lines as straight as I could. And now I want to demonstrate how I flip the pattern for the next one, because if you haven't done it before, it can be a little confusing. So I leave the majority of the quilt in place and I peel back the part that I just worked on. Now, that's my center of my quilt. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull this out and flip it. So now the center of my quilt is right there. I still have my top border up here and my side border over there. Now that I have it flipped, yes, this is awkward. I'm holding my phone in one hand, but sliding down. So one thing about tricot is it slides, it's smooth. Most of the time it's great to work with, unless it gets too stretchy. Anyway, so then I slide it over until I line up the center with the other pieces I've already marked. And then once I have it, I will get my pins and I will pin it in place. Oh, I've got a little bubble here, not a huge deal. Okay, so if you see, you can see how that half of a rosebud right there is going to match up with half of a rosebud right there. So when I pin, I'm gonna really focus on starting from the center line of the quilt that goes this way, and then the center line of the quilt that goes that way, because I need these to match up. Tricot is stretchy enough in other directions that if I have to fudge a little bit in the outer corners, not a big deal. I need my center to be on track as much as I can. And remember, this will work fine with whole cloth quilts, with cottons or any other fabric that you desire to use. Just follow the same directions. If you use, of course, a cotton or something, don't plan on the stretchy being a part of your saving grace, but all fabric stretches some. So watch out for that. Use it if you need. And I'm gonna finish marking this last section of quilt.